with a major in history in 1971, and from there to Crozer Theological Seminary in Rochester, New York, where I received the M.A. in Black Church Studies in 1973 and the Master of Divinity in Theology in 1975. And of course, I matriculated at Northwestern University with a degree in, received a degree in American Christianity, a PhD in 1980. And from there, of course, I went to Worcester College, and I spent a year there in the Department of Religion and Philosophy, and from there to Colgate University in New York. Spent 2 years there in the Department of Religion and Philosophy. 1984, I came to Vanderbilt, the fall of '84, and I spent 29 and a half years teaching in the Religious Studies Department at Vanderbilt. For some 40 years now, I've been involved in King Scholarship, scholarship on the life, thought, and activities of Martin Luther King, Jr. I've written about 6 books on Dr. King, edited 2, co-edited 2, co-authored 2, for a total of 12 books. So for the last 40 years, I've been involved in Martin Luther King Jr. scholarship.
You are, in a real sense, Dr. Martin Luther King, reincarnated or
Thank
whatever.
you. Thank you.
Dr. Baldwin, let's talk about the Confederate monuments. That is to sort of lay down the topic for the first 2 minutes of next 2 minutes before we have our second commercial break.
Okay.
And remind our audience that you also talked about the Confederacy itself and the Confederate Constitution, et cetera. Pull that information in when you talk about those monuments.
Yes, the last time I was here, I talked about the Confederate flag and the debate swirling around
and bring all of that
Confederate
information
flag.
in.
But now, since August the 12th, and I think you remember that date, the violent confrontation in Charlottesville, Virginia, between neo-Nazis, Klansmen, and counter-protesters. And I think that encounter on August 12th, 2017, actually triggered this debate around Confederate monuments. And we have to understand the history of those monuments. Right after the Civil War ended in 1865, there was really no attempt to engage in a massive campaign for the erection of these kinds of monuments. In fact, most of them were erected between the 1890s and the 1960s. The 1890s, you have the black codes, Jim Crow laws being put into place. And of course, there was a reaction to that, keeping blacks from voting, that kind of thing. So you get, from the 1890s on, the erection of Confederate monuments. Through the 1920s with the revival of the Ku Klux Klan. And we don't see these monuments being erected on a mass scale after that time until the 1950s and 60s when the Civil Rights Movement started. And of course, it occurred as a backlash to what was going on with Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. So since August 12th of this year, we've had this debate since the events in Charlottesville about whether or not these monuments should be dismantled, put into historical museums. There are all kinds of questions about whether or not they should exist.